Let me come to you, Konrad, and I have to admit that when we met before you came, we decided, do we start with you or do we end with you? Do you want to start low and talk about downgrades and then end high? You're going to start high and end low, right? But we decided to end with you. But I think what's more interesting, we thought would be, yes, we're all aware of the downgrades and what's going on the continent. But despite this, how do you view Africa as an investment destination, and why should it be attractive to the audience today?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman, for getting me the closing bit. I understand you wanted to have someone at the very beginning who would be positive and kicking it off in a nice, positive way. Thanks very much also to Hubert and the AI team for having me here at the conference. And I'll try my best to really get some positive messages out to you in the audience. I promise you. But I can tell you at the same time, from a credit rating agency's perspective, the last 15 to 18 months were difficult months, very challenging. And when I look at, for instance, our sovereign ratings we have in Africa, 17, there's only one now left in investment grade. That's Botswana. If someone from Botswana is here, you must feel special. Congratulations. All the others now are non-investment grade, including South Africa, as many of you will have noticed. Although South Africa had a BB+ rating, it is non-investment grade, but it's still a very different ball game compared to many of the other ratings we have on the continent, which would be in the single B category, or even worse. And again, when I'm saying we had a tough 15, 18 months over the last year or so, it's really also because we had seen defaults. We had Mozambique defaulting, we had a technical default in Congo-Brazzaville. And again, ratings really, if anything, were more on a downward trajectory than going up. The question now is, have we reached a level where things are bottoming out? And I think there truly is a way that we can say things are bottoming out. We have seen a lot of the negative outlooks being changed back to stable. And obviously the macro environment, the global environment has changed again somewhat. One thing I'd like to say with regards to the past 15, 18 months that were indeed very tough, notwithstanding the downgrades we have seen, I'm tempted to say that African countries, African sovereigns have actually proved to be fairly resilient. If the external shocks we had seen through commodity prices falling off a cliff, demand weakening and all of that, if that would have been 10, 20 years ago, I think the disruptions would have been much more significant than what we had seen over the last couple of months. Yes, we have seen, and this is why ratings had gone down, we have seen imbalances growing quite rapidly, and I come to that in a moment. The volatilities, the vulnerabilities are still there. And I think the question we must ask ourselves with policymakers and in a forum like this one is, what can be done to deal with the volatilities? Take, for example, a case like Angola. And I'm only picking it because it's up in the alphabet. I could use Z, Zambia, would be a very similar story. You had a current account surplus of 11% in 2012. That turned into a current account deficit of 12% in 2016. You had a budget surplus of 6% in 2012. That turned out to be a deficit of 5.5 in 2016. You had net government debt in 2012 of 2%. That turned out to be 36% in 2016. Sorry for that. But it shows again, and I could quote quite a number of other countries, it shows again, the moment you have pressure, the moment we still have volatility, we have vulnerabilities, in particular when it comes to important credit metrics we as a rating agency would look at. And I think that brings me to the other sort of observation I wanted to share, and I think there is something positive in it. When we analyze sovereigns on the continent or on the globe, we look very much at basically 6 main areas of analysis. One would be the institutional assessment, one is an economic assessment, one is an external assessment, one is budget, one is debt, and the other one is monetary assessment. I would, for the sake of this discussion, I zero in on basically three: the institutional assessment, economic assessment, and the budget assessment. And that's, for me, when I look at African sovereigns, where the crux is, where we need to see strengthening. You look at the economic assessment, among the 17 rated sovereigns we have in Africa, they all score the economic assessment as a weakness. There's none where it's at least neutral or even a strength. So again, that's where where work needs to be done. And that's where policymakers should focus on. You look at the institutional assessment, which is very critical, and we have seen that, for instance, now with the South African downgrade. Again, you have a number, out of the 17, you have 4 that score neutral, the rest would be weak. Again, there's not a single sub-Saharan African sovereign where we score the institutional assessment as a strength. On the fiscal side, again, predominantly weak. And I think when you look at these 3 categories in particular, they hang together. That's where we have to see things strengthening. And when you look at it from an investor perspective, yes, we had gone through the lions on the move, if I can sort of come back to that. We had the narrative of Africa rising. I think what we see today, and that's reflected in the ratings differentiation we have a multi-speed Africa. And I think investors will increasingly focus on the success stories. They will want to see, if they give money to investment, what's that investment going to do? Is it going to support growth? And I think there will be, and there are stories, credit stories in Africa, where we have success stories, where we see growth, and where over time, some of these weaknesses I just shared with you, will turn into strengths and will help see ratings improve again. And then there are others that are falling behind. So for me, we are moving from the lions that were on the move, from Africa rising, we are moving to what we have is a multi-speed Africa. And in a multi-speed Africa for me is there will be winners and there will be losers. And I think from an investor perspective, it's about picking the winners, I suppose.
Thank you.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.